Let's talk about your supply chain commitments, because, you know, can you take me through that, what it is and how you're doing it?
Yeah. So I'll start by saying it's one of our supply chain decarbonization program. It's called our net zero program, net zero project, excuse me. And that gives it away almost from the beginning. We have a 2025 goal, but it is our net zero project. That should say something to you about the importance of this program in our more long-term net zero goals. So our goal right now is to slash the operational emissions of our top 1,000 suppliers in half by 2025. Very high level, there's 5 steps in that program. We launched this in 2021. Identify the suppliers, engage and train them, measure their emissions, reduce their emissions, and report on progress. That's not a rocket science as far as a program execution here is concerned. But I think
can I ask you a question? Can I ask you a question on that? What reliance have you got, or what options do your suppliers have to use offsets as part of that reduction program? So like gold standard offsets or stuff like that. Is that part of that, or is that outside of? It's
outside. This is reduction. This is reduction of operational emissions. So offsets are used to offset scope 3.
Right.
When we talk about operational emissions, it's shifting to renewable energy. It's reducing energy and shifting to renewable energy. So it's a 50% reduction, not a 50% offset.
Okay.
So
do you then? So I'm sorry, Hannah.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
So and then how does that impact their supply chain, right? So how does you doing that to them then impact their kind of extended supply chain? Is it a domino effect?
Not yet. It will be. Not yet. Right now we're focused on step 1 because we're not going to boil the ocean. It is just our tier 1 suppliers and just our top 1,000 suppliers. They make up the vast majority of our procurement of those. So that's just step 1, just focusing on their operations. So it doesn't touch tier 2 or tier 3.
Right.
It does, however, it's not just slashing the emissions of producing what they're selling to us. It's all of their emissions. So all of these reductions don't only benefit Schneider and, of course, our customers, but anyone else who buys stuff from them.
But you would like to think that in the same way that hopefully other companies are setting their own standards for what they're going to do and aligning with your standards, you'd like to think that your suppliers might well be dealing with their top 100, 200. So, I mean, although it's not obligatory and it's not something that you're mandating, you'd like to think that as part of your journey, that they're going to get on board because you're an important customer to them and they're going to demonstrate that they're pushing the barriers as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually you touched on something really important here that I like to touch on, because when we talk about supply chain decarbonization, companies like Schneider and others are starting down this path now, but it's not a mandatory top-down. It's not a mandatory just put this in your contracts, make it a requirement, go do it. I mean, collaboration is key, and I think it's worth highlighting that of the 1,000 suppliers that we launched this with, all 1,000 signed up, and it wasn't mandatory. I was actually surprised over the first year that all 1,000 and then some, there's like 1,015. We had suppliers knocking on our door to take place when they weren't to participate when they weren't invited. After that first year, roughly 70% of those participating suppliers had zero previous experience in calculating the greenhouse gas emissions. Yet they still all said yes. 70.
Oh, wow.
So, how we do so, we invest heavily in this program on capability building, digital support, expert consultation. So in 2021, we had over 100% participation rate, and that's not top-down suppliers, you will. This is invitation to a program. All these suppliers see the essential nature of sustainability to the resiliency of their business, so they said yes. So 2022, we just published our sustainability report not too long ago. We executed a whopping, it was about 150 live training, mentoring, experience sharing sessions, dedicated one-on-one support, all led by our procurement team throughout the year of 2022. We provided them with a digital emissions calculator, free to all participating companies as part of the digital toolkit. And that resulted in 2022 of 946 suppliers were able to compute their carbon footprint. Wow. That's massive. So, year one, getting everyone to sign up. Year two, pretty much everyone has a baseline. Anyone who's involved in calculating carbon baselines knows it's not necessarily that easy. So we're really excited about that momentum. And I think earlier I brought up the Zygo launch as well. So all last year, our sustainability experts were busy preparing for that launch that we just did last week. And Zygo is a sustainability software ecosystem built to simplify and accelerate climate action for companies of all sizes. But it really complements our consulting services and enhances the growing portfolio of digital solutions. I bring it up here because of what I said earlier about small and medium businesses. This platform brings existing Schneider digital tools for sustainability into a software as a service application. So it's designed to help small and medium enterprises decarbonize. And that will let them accelerate their journey.
Well, I'm assuming those 150 training sessions that you gave, right? Mm-hmm. You honed that down over a period of time, and that there's been an output to that. So you've created a methodology, content around it that is supporting this software system in some way, shape, or form. And then I'm also assuming that when you look at how you're kind of approaching an LCA and how you're kind of you're providing your own standard reporting expectations of your suppliers, right? So you're almost creating a methodology for them to conform to what you're trying to do, because there's lots, like calculating carbon emissions. You can do it monthly, you can do it annually, you can do it hourly, you can do it off market-based reporting, location-based reporting. You could, I mean, the categorization process of reporting your carbon emissions is, you could get lost in it. Do you know what I mean? So do you feel like your standard, you're creating your own standard for not only measuring their emissions, but also how they could, how companies can kind of report on their EDP or their LCA certificates? We're
definitely working in that direction as well. I hadn't linked that actually to our supply chain decarbonization program yet. But sure, I mean, all of our expertise in how we do things, we're proposing that to our supply chain 100% as well. That may accelerate, and I believe will accelerate standardization. Actually, before going to that, Dan, I'd like to go back to something you touched on earlier, if I will, is the role that this plays in our overall net zero journey, and your question on whether it was potentially pushing our suppliers to push the efforts further down the supply chain. Because when you think about net zero, that's what has to happen. It has to be pushed entirely through the entire supply chain straight down to the mine. If not, we're not going to get there. So what I wanted to say is a resounding, that's the next step. So currently, are our tier one suppliers pushing it further down the supply chain? Not yet, not yet. They just got their baseline. Next step is establishing a strategy and delivering on the reduction that's required by 2025. And we're very, very confident we're going to get there. But our global teams, our supply chain teams, are already thinking about how to widen and how to deepen. So widen, more suppliers, more tiered as well, going to tier 2, eventually to tier 3, et cetera, but also deepen. So our current program is focused on their operational missions, so efficiency and renewable energy. Next step absolutely is to expand it to scope 3. And that's when it triggers focus and prioritization through the next level of supply chain.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what I was hoping, really, because when I was thinking about what I was going to ask you, and referenced 50% operational emissions by 2025, well, what next? The 50% is, from how we're discussing this, there's a quite a good chance that you should exceed that 50% by 2025. And by driving it down the supply chain, you're naturally taking the journey from 50% to 100%, right? So the process is evolving as it starts, and the time period in which it's working already, you could see how it's realistic that A, your objectives are going to be achieved, and then B, you've got a natural kind of trajectory to extend them and to keep going, right? Which is really exciting to hear. Yeah, it's really exciting to hear. So I know they're kind of similar, but just tell me on the LCA, because that's the biggest challenge, isn't it? To try and get to scope 3 emissions, right?
Yeah.
And to understand what the real ingredients are, for want of a better description, in items, and having some. I mean, I was reading an article the other day. I was a report that was in Europe. There's something like 184 different European green marks or sustainability marks, or some form of like something related to becoming zero carbon. Only under 50% of them are audited, right? The level of kind of control and transparency on the mark or the claim, there's so much BS involved in it that that getting some standardization and being able to report accurately and auditably, and I'd be interested in your take on that side of things.
Yeah, it is a top priority right now across the industry, without a doubt. I think we've set the bar high. Of course, we'll blow our own horn here. We've been a pioneer on the standardization of product sustainability reporting for quite some time right now. Back in 2009, we worked with several other companies to found the organization called PEP Eco Passport. So we conduct our life cycle assessments on all our products, publish them as PEP's product environmental profiles, which are pretty much an equivalent of an EPD, environmental product disclosure. So it's full not just carbon, full environmental footprint impact across all life cycle stages of a product. We publish them publicly. Anyone can go get the data. That said, everyone does it differently. So this is good for us because we have the data on our product. So when we go to design the next generation, we have all the data on the previous generation and can make data-driven decisions to reduce the environmental impact. But when it comes to providers of digital infrastructure, trying to make decisions on whether to buy product A from company whatever, they can ask for data until they're blue in the face, and maybe they'll get data from everyone, but all the data is different. It's based on different methodologies, different assumptions, and they can't use that data to make sustainability-driven procurement decisions, and they can't use that data to drive their own reporting because it can't compare apples to apples. So it's a massive challenge for the industry. To drive industry standardization, we here at Schneider Electric, and me as well personally, we fully back the iMasons Climate Accord. It's a historic cooperative of over 200 companies now, has over something like a $6 trillion market cap, and we're laser focused on accelerating carbon reduction in digital infrastructure, materials, equipment, and power. And the great thing is it's led by a governing body, initially comprised of leaders, true leaders in the industry. So we've got Google, Meta, Microsoft, AWS, and of course, iMasons on that governing body as well. Last year, that governing body was expanded. It now includes a co-location company, one of the leading companies, Digital Realty Trust, and Schneider Electric. So I sit on that governing body with representatives from all of these leaders within the digital infrastructure space. That said, that is a little bit of last year's news. That happened, let's see here, last fall. But what we've done since then is we've defined the mandate of 3 working groups. Those working groups for materials, equipment, and power. And Schneider Electric, of course, plays within the equipment part of that, is to review existing methodologies for carbon disclosure, identifying gaps, inconsistencies, et cetera, and providing a recommendation back to the governing body on what kind of carbon accounting disclosures, methodologies, and frameworks we think members of the ICA, the iMasons Climate Accord, should sign up for. And again, we've got 200 companies that have signed up for this accord. So we have a really good platform with the leading hyperscalers on board to help drive this through the supply chain. Good news is we've already launched 2 of those working groups. Schneider Electric's own Alex Rakow has launched the equipment working group and is recruiting his leadership team now. Meta stepped up for the materials working group. That's Lisa Hedstrom, and she's, again, recruiting, and we're still working on tying up the chair for the power working group. So it is a priority. It is so much of a priority for the infrastructure. All these companies have come together.
Can I ask you a question? So, when you think about the number of data center projects that are going on, right? Mm-hmm. The amount of capacity that's required and stroke being built. The supply chain is a key component of that, right? Yep. Whether or not you've got whether you've ordered generators, you ordered crack units, so how long it's going to take for someone to supply equipment to you has been, pre-COVID, post-COVID. I mean, again, this is, do you foresee a time when there is a shortage for, lower carbon equipment, and it's going to take slightly longer for that to come, which is going to throw my program out by a few months, but I can get this higher carbon equipment earlier because no one's been buying it because it's higher carbon equipment. Do you know what I mean? I mean, how is this? How do you prioritize things like carbon, climate, when you're in such a fast-growing industry with such shortages, price sensitivity? The hyperscalers are not doubling what they're paying to colo operators on a cost per kilowatt. Everyone's trying to keep their margin, the amount. Everyone's negotiating price. How easy is it for something like this to truly be the driving light behind the decisions that are being made within our industry?
Not easy. I think, price and lead time will continue to trump almost anything else. I mean, it's just the reality of the world we live in. That said, I think it very much is realistic to foresee carbon footprint being right up there along with price and lead time. It's just another way to view your procurement decisions. Does it mean in the short term, as data center providers put an RFP for UPSs, for example, and they see they can get them, 6 months from the supplier, 12 months from the supplier, 18 months from the next supplier, and the 18-month supplier also has I'm making this up, a 20% reduction in embodied carbon. They're probably still, depending on their timelines, they probably are still going to go with the ones that will meet their timelines. But what I'm interested in is ensuring that sustainability gets elevated into that consideration. So I think today it's not. I think there's a lot of great companies doing a lot of great things, but is it a priority for design teams? Is it a priority for procurement teams? Is it going into contracts? Not consistently today. So I think that's the first step.
No, I get you. I spend quite a lot of time talking about immersion cooling, or talking to people about immersion cooling, right? And in theory, if you were going to build the next generation fleet of data centers, and some of the cloud companies are moving in that direction, you would certainly move away from air. You'd move more towards liquid at more of a rapid time period, or you'd focus on the IT aspect of things. The PUE is certainly at levels of that are difficult to beat in many locations, but the runtime of IT and the performance of IT, there's definitely a lot of stuff that can be done. I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to you, Anna, and I've taken far too much of your time. And I think the last question I've got for you, which I think you've kind of answered with the iMasons, is the standardization of this approach as an industry. But what do you see being the kind of key metrics that we can use to measure progress, and how can we ensure that they're accurate, aligned, and easy to measure?
I wish I had an easy answer for that. I will say, absolute reduction of carbon is a key metric, and it's what we're looking to focus on, align on, standardize on across digital infrastructure with iMasons. That said, though, I'd be remiss not to mention that there are loads of other facets of environmental sustainability. And actually here at Schneider Electric, was it early last year? No, it was late 2021, December 2021. We published the industry's first ever full framework for data center sustainability metrics. Not going to go through them all here, but there's 23 different metrics in that white paper. It's called Guide to Environmental Sustainability Metrics for Data Centers, white paper 67. 23 different metrics. But again, they're not 23 metrics for everyone. And we actually propose a maturity model in that white paper as well for beginners, advanced, and industry leaders. But roughly, they're categorized across 5 different categories. So energy consumption, efficiency, regardless of what kind of power you're buying, even if you're at 100% renewable energy, of course, efficiency is key here, especially as we expect the demand for digital infrastructures to continue exploding. There's no slowdown in sight. 2 is overall greenhouse gas emissions, and this is of course where carbon is included. But we don't only have carbon. We have SF6. We have refrigerants from cooling, et cetera, et cetera. But greenhouse gas emissions obviously is a big priority for the industry. Then we have water. That comes up really very often in iMasons conversations. Like, when are we going to dive into the world of water? There's all sorts of different stats out there, but one that comes to mind right now is about a 15 megawatt data center can use up to something like 400,000 gallons of water a day. It's just something you can't even wrap your brain around. So we have water, we have waste. Around circularity solutions for data centers, second life. It's not just about carbon here on end of life. It's about avoiding carbon for new infrastructure using virgin materials. And then last, we have the whole world of land and biodiversity. And it's not just about a data center's impact on, the land the data center is sitting on, but all of these metrics should be pushed also through the entire value chain. So metrics, there's a lot of them, and I think it's absolutely appropriate that there is. I know a lot of folks do want to simplify it. We always look for ways to simplifying it, but sustainability is a complex topic that touches on many different things. And I think we're quite fortunate actually in the digital infrastructure world to have many different angles we can take to address this. And you can start someplace and then build yourself up. So, we're working with iMasons to standardize on carbon, how we calculate carbon, how we report on carbon. Water maybe next. We'll see, but we'll continue.
So I think, I went out for dinner with someone on Saturday night who's involved in the next UN meeting in this year. And this is the first year, apparently they're going to report back on the progress in quite detail as to what progress we're making. And it seems to be, from what he was saying, that it's going to be more of a question of adaptability now, that we're not going to meet the targets that we've set in terms of reduction in. And again, it was but do you think, given your background and where you're at, I mean, how viable is this process that we're going through? Are you confident that we can, because the other thing is that there's no regulation on data. There's no one out there that is controlling us consume. We're the ones that are driving the demand, right? With our consumption of data. There's no regulation on no one even knows what type of data is in a data center, whether it's, mission critical data saving lives, or whether it's, TikTok, or, so, if you had a crystal ball, and I know this is probably not how we should end things, but if you did have a crystal ball, what do you think the future lies? Do you think there's going to be a stage where, data will be regulated, that consumption will change, we can really get to the point where it's not an extinction level event from a climate change perspective? What's your kind of thoughts at a personal level on that?
Yeah, I love the question. At a personal level, sometimes I'm terrified. I'm a mom. I have an 8-year-old daughter. Even if you don't have kids, you read the latest reports that come out of the United Nations, and they're quite gloom. Appropriately so, because they look at what science is telling us. And we're currently not on a very positive trajectory. That said, I am a bit of an optimist personally. I regardless see so much positive forward momentum in the industry, and do firmly believe that we can set really ambitious goals, especially those of us working in these big multinational corporations. We can set these big ambitious goals, but that doesn't mean that other folks participating in the space that potentially aren't being as ambitious aren't doing enough, or I don't want to discredit others' efforts. I think any reduction is good. It's not looking good around curbing global emissions by 50% by 2030. It's not looking good. But I'm optimistic because we have the world, we do have the technology. We do know how to do this. We just need to move faster. And I'll put big air quotes around just, because I know it was just that easy. We would all do it. I guess I'd caution against sort of the doom or gloom. Like, if we don't miss our goals, that's it. We're done. I don't think that's the case. And I think that's potentially one of the dangers of goals. We have to have goals, though. I'm not by all means not advocating that we don't, but we're not over as a human race if we don't meet our goals by 2030 or 2050. But if we stop making progress and stop accelerating, I start worrying a little bit more. But I am quite optimistic, especially within the digital infrastructure world, industry, that we're going in the right direction. And I think we're providing really a lot of how-to, a lot of frameworks, a lot of best practices for other industries to follow suit.
Yeah.
I think we can do it.
Yeah, I, you know, the last thing we could do is give up, right? We have to keep striving and keep making every effort that we can. Anna, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. Thank you so much for taking the time and extending the meeting. And yeah, I look forward to catching up with you again, you know, probably in a year's time and seeing what progress you've been made. You're clearly an organization that is, you know, pushing the barriers in this space, and, you know, one that we're excited about hearing from more and more. And I think the more vocal you can be as a business, the better it is for everyone. So no, thanks for taking the time to speak with me.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Dan, and look forward to catching up with you in about a year's time. I'm going to hold you to that.
Yeah.